Sustainability in 2022. Hi guys, I'm Syama, CEO of Scaling Retail. And boy, sustainability is front and center as we look to the future of retail. Not only have we been seeing large companies like Gucci taking a major stance to stand behind sustainable and carbon neutral initiatives, but we're also seeing companies like Allbirds that have IPO'd with a pure play on sustainability. This is quite a phenomenal time in fashion to be able to witness and see how things are evolving. In addition to that, science has started to back up a lot of these trends. We all used to be so hungry for sustainable fabrics and innovations, but now it's not too hard to do searching and to find manufacturers of, let's say, athletic materials that are coming out of recycled plastic bottles, or looking for leathers that are being made from apple, or looking at fabrics that are being made from bananas. There are so many different ways these days to be able to engage in sustainability that we have to ask ourselves, what's the lens that we are going to be pulling through? How are we going to be sequencing and tracking these changes? And ultimately, what is at the heart and at the ethos of our brand and what we are developing? This past year, guys, I have met with a dozen brands, if not a little bit more, but spent quite a bit of time with them that are all looking at different ways of implementing sustainability. Whether it's looking at vegan leather for shoes, or looking at new ways of producing activewear, or even approaching cashmere and knits from a new perspective, everyone has got their finger on the pulse in terms of the direction of the market. But what are the ways in which they're winning, and what are the ways in which there's ways for improvement, or how can we improve? Well, number one of the biggest issues in sustainability right now is the cost of raw materials. Science is doing its best to be able to produce and innovate, but we also need to see these materials be able to be available at some sort of scale. So when we think about the scalability of these materials, we have to ask ourselves, okay, how much is it going to cost for me today, and what do my minimums actually need to look like for my margins to get better in the future? I also think it's not a bad idea to talk to any of these small suppliers and say, hey, can I actually get into a group buy with other brands that are also buying a similar product so that we can actually get together and buy this material at a better scale? So we should be looking at collaborating our sourcing needs in order to get better pricing on these certain products. Now, when we start to ask ourselves other roads for sustainability, what else does sustainability mean outside of just the materials? We're looking at zero waste production. These days, it's so much easier to find factories that actually are implementing this and providing a whole host of other kinds of products coming out of the zero waste concept. People are excited about zero waste. There are so many different odds and ends and little things you can create from it. And ultimately, when it comes to creating tangibles or other products, zero waste initiatives, I think, provide a space here for a tremendous amount of innovation. Now, in addition to that, we're not just want to, only look at things like the actual fabrics, but we also need to look at things like buttons and trims and how we're looking at sustainability through and through the entire garment. Right? Once we move beyond kind of the core fundamentals of that garment and those materials, we then need to look at the labor in which we are employing people. Are we using fair wages? What do these factories look like? What are their policies with how they're handling things like dye and runoff from these mills that you're working with? All of these components actually really create a very long list that you actually need to be checking off in order to see where you're tracking to on these different rubrics here of sustainability. Now, one of the things that I'm most excited by is really the democratization of access to sustainable products. One of the projects that I had started, maybe it's almost 10 years ago at this point, was an initiative around how we democratize a very simple organic white sock. And in my mind, I said, well, if we can actually give access to a sustainable product to a wide consumer market, having a sustainable good does not necessarily have to be only relegated for the affluent. And I think that there's a huge white space here in terms of how we look at getting sustainable goods that are made ethically in front of a larger audience. This needs to be addressed in a much more major way. Again, I believe it'll happen over time, but access to these products should not just be for the affluent. It really needs to be more democratized so people have access. So how else are we looking at sustainability? Well, obviously we're looking at carbon neutrality. We're also looking at the ways in which we're future forecasting in terms of the sequence of achieving these goals. Today, I am proud to say that there are so many more sustainability consultants out there that are so intimated with the fundamentals of the rubric of how you achieve a fully sustainable business that is scalable, that it is unprecedented now more than ever. Also, what I think is very important is a lot of these major companies are now implementing and hiring people that are chief sustainable officers, right? These are people whose eyes are really peeled specifically to how they're adhering to manufacturing processes, sourcing processes, and really the future of the materials that they are using. Even companies like Hermes are starting to introduce these sorts of vegan leathers and sustainable practices, which I think are incredible while maintaining a high price point. But again, I don't just believe it's about the high price point. I think it's about democratizing the access to these goods. So what's my recommendation as you look to the future of sustainability and your business? Well, obviously, there's a huge list of things that you can choose to ascribe to. As a small business, you have to ask yourself, how does my costing and my investment, right? How can I actually build this business to scale? What does scale mean to my business? But how do I build the foundation of this in a way that's going to incrementally have the growth that I'm looking for while adhering to the principles that I believe in? Right? Being able to layer in and add over time things that maybe become more accessible to you, right? As you're able to afford them. If you're able to afford the long list of things that you can do, please do, right? It's better for people, it's better for the planet, and ultimately selling to a higher end affluent customer a product in this space is ultimately just a triple win-win for everyone involved. So I do think there's a lot of white space and opportunity for that. At the same time, again, guys, we should be looking to pick the white space and the opportunities for bigger access to much more people so we can actually move purchasing. We can actually move climate change through how we engage with our products and through more conscious consumption. The other thing that's very important to understand here is that sustainability is not just in manufacturing, it's not just in sourcing, it's not just in how we look at implementing things like carbon neutrality, which have to do with things like shipping and logistics and how you're moving products, right, from one country to another country in order to sell it, right? It's expensive, right? Putting something on an air freight isn't cheap, right? You're using a lot of gasoline. We also want to take a look at how we're building out our ethos, right, to be able to back into it over time. So ask yourself, what are my mission? What are my values, right? How are these components building into those mission and values? And how do I sequence these things in a way that make more sense for my business? And one thing that's important for us not to forget here is that it's not just the first purchase that we have to keep in mind. We're also now, from a sustainable perspective, looking at things like the resale market, the rental market. So developing a relationship with a company like Rent the Runway might also help achieve your sustainable goals. Developing a collaboration with, let's say, The RealReal or another platform where you're going to be reselling your goods that are used is also a fantastic way to enter into the sustainability marketplace. Companies like ThredUp are seeing tremendous growth because people are looking at these secondary markets to buy their products, these resale platforms. So again, it's not just what you've done to get to that first purchase, but also how are you planning on growing over time and reselling your goods and creating a sustainable ecosystem? What of your products are going to be biodegradable? Had the privilege of working with a client this year who's developing garments where, hey, if they're not able to take it back, you might be able to just plant it into the ground, right? And have it dissipate and enter back into the earth. So lots of different ways in which we're looking at innovation, lots of different ways in which we're looking at sustainability. Again, not just luxury, but all markets I think are important here as we democratize access and do better fashion for the planet. All right, guys, that's all from me over here at Scaling Retail. If you're interested in launching and growing your sustainable business, send us an email at hello@scalingretail.com. We're well networked with industry leaders in sustainability consulting and certainly provide the best co-CEO experience to help you conduct the orchestra to take your product and vision to market and scale. All right, guys, talk to you later. Bye.